The Undertaker made an appearance on WWE's The Bump. The Godfather did also, separately, and he was his usual gregarious self and very jovial, loving life. Shane McMahon popped his head into the studio as a surprise, so they had a fun little reunion there with him and the Godfather. I guess Shane dropped by the office that day and heard the Godfather's voice booming through the halls and decided to pop his head in, so that was cool. But Undertaker was on, and he expressed an interest in getting more involved in the coaching and mentoring side of things with WWE. Hat tip to Fightful for the transcription here. He said, "I'm trying to find where my niche is and that aspect because I think I'm a natural mentor type. I love being, when I'm in the venues and I'm around the guys and people come and pick my brain, I really enjoy that and talking philosophy." Now, Undertaker spent 30 years in the ring, over 30 years, and he had incredible longevity for somebody his size, with a gimmick that I think if it were almost anybody else probably would have died off very quickly. He made it work, and he parlayed that into a Hall of Fame career. So he is certainly someone the younger generation can learn from. I think he could be a great asset to them. Although I'm starting to question his judgment after the next comment that he made. He was asked about Omos, who has been under the learning tree for much of this year with AJ Styles on Raw. Another great person to learn from. Undertaker had this to say about the big guy. The biggest thing for him, and it's funny that you mentioned him because I'll say this, there will never be another Andre, but this guy is as close as we've come. I mean, and that's a big statement, absolutely, but he's special, almost as special. The big thing for him to know and to realize is that he is special and that he is different from everybody else. There's nobody. The average size of the wrestler in general is smaller than it was. So here's this guy who is incredibly athletic. He's incredibly huge. He is a big, big, strong man. It's important for him to make sure that he protects that. Sometimes you guys don't understand what that means. I've had a couple of conversations about what he should do and what he shouldn't do, and if things get too heated, call me. Now, I do understand what he's saying when he talks about protecting him because of his size. He's right. There aren't a lot of guys in today's WWE that look like Omos does, that have the size and the presence that he does because the man is over 7 feet tall, legit. He doesn't want to see him booked like everybody else on the roster. He probably doesn't want to see him selling too much for guys half his size or doing any high-flying moves that a 7-foot guy shouldn't be doing. So that I understand. But to compare him to Andre the Giant and say that he is the closest thing the WWE has seen to Andre. First of all, that sound you heard in the background is the Big Show's heart breaking in two. That's kind of a slap in his face, I think. And not just because they used to call him Andre's son. But outside of his height, what exactly has Omos done to lead one to believe that he is the closest thing that we have seen to Andre the Giant? The answer is nothing. He has done nothing. Giant Gonzalez was taller than both of them, and he could barely walk. Same with the Great Khali. It was painful to watch him walk. Omos is more mobile than either of those two. He has improved a bit since working with AJ as far as some of the big man spots that he does. You know, I look at him in the ring sometimes. He still looks to me, every time I see him in the ring, he still looks like he's a second away from just cracking up laughing. And again, he's still very inexperienced. He's still finding himself. Maybe that's something that will change in time. But watch his facial expressions. Watch his face when he's in the ring. He always looks like he's about to just start laughing hysterically. But to compare him to Andre the Giant, from an athletic standpoint, Omos couldn't hold a candle to what Andre was doing in the 70s, before his body started breaking down on him. Andre was tremendously agile in the ring for a man his size back then. I mean, if your only frame of reference for Andre was the first WrestleMania and beyond, you missed Andre in his prime. I miss prime Andre. But I've gone back since, and I've watched him, and he was incredible. We haven't seen anything even remotely close to that from Omos yet. I mean, it's a great compliment, and Omos went on Twitter and he responded and he was humbled by it. But he's got a ways to go before I think we can start making comparisons to Andre the Giant. That, to me, is just ridiculous. He's still the Jolly Green Giant out there. And I think the biggest thing that hurts somebody like him, again, AJ Styles, great person for him to work with, great person for him to learn from. But if he had come up in a different time in the wrestling business, in the territory days where he would have had different places to work, or even if they had kept him down in developmental and allowed him to actually develop more, which I thought was the whole point of developmental, instead of putting him on Raw way before he was ready to be there, he would be able to improve his game before we even got to lay eyes on him. Today, he doesn't have that luxury. He's got to kind of learn on the job because Vince McMahon took one look at this guy and said, holy shit, we got to get this guy on TV. We don't have anybody who looks like him. You know, Andre also wouldn't have been as special if he was on Raw every single week. A lot of those guys who got over as major stars in the 70s, the 80s, the early 90s, not all of them, but a lot of them also would not have been as special. They would not have gotten over as big if they were constantly, you know, on television every week, 3 hours every Monday of Raw or 2 hours of SmackDown, whatever it is. You know, they also would not have felt all that special and they would have been played out. But right now, he's just another in a long line of big guys that have come along, a lot of which have fizzled out. You know, maybe Omos will be different because he has a lot of people in his corner supporting him. Undertaker's talking him up. Kevin Nash had a hand in training him. But he's got a long way to go before he can be compared to Andre the Giant. Some other news and notes. GCW officially sold out its Hammerstein Ballroom debut for January 23rd in New York City. Per the Observer, they sold over 1,800 tickets. The first day tickets went on sale to the public, and they sold out the remaining 200 or so the next day, which was Thanksgiving Day. So those tickets are gone. The secondary market price to get into the building for that show right now is $90. That's higher than any WWE or AEW show that's on sale right now. So it's a hot ticket. It's pretty impressive for an independent promotion with no television to go into a building like that first time out and sell out. And part of it is just, you know, the allure of it being the first time. Are they going to be able to sell out the Hammerstein every time if they go back there? Probably not every time, but it's still an impressive feat. The show is going to be streaming live on Fight TV. They did that without a single match being announced. This is strictly just they're riding a wave of momentum among their fans. And, you know, a lot of independent wrestling fans. Not one match announced yet, but they've built up a lot of goodwill with their audience. The only names announced for the show so far are Eddie Kingston and the Briscoes, Jay and Mark, who have wrestled in that building many times for Ring of Honor. And if he's out of rehab by then, the GCW champion is still Jon Moxley. And that would be another big name to add. We don't know when he'll be back. I think there's a pretty good chance by January. By the end of January, you know, Moxley will be back. So if he is back, that's just another big name to add to the card. But hold on, everybody. Hold on. Random dude on Twitter who hides his face behind a ninja mask replied to WrestleTix. So WrestleTix on Twitter posted the latest ticket update announcing that the show is sold out. And I made the mistake of looking at the replies. And there was a random dude who was wearing some kind of weird mask. I don't know if his face was burned by acid, if his face is all scarred up and all jacked up, who knows. But he had to chime in because he was puzzled by how this show sold out when he had never heard of the event until now. And when other people replied and said that the guy must not follow GCW's social media, otherwise they would have been well aware of this show taking place, he doubled down. He doubled down on dumb and said that they did, and I quote, a damn poor job on the marketing if I haven't seen jack about it on any other social media app. You hear that, Brett Lauderdale? I hope you're listening. You must have done a really piss poor job on marketing this sold out show because random ninja dude on Twitter knew nothing about it. Who the fuck are you? If stupidity was a clinical diagnosis, this guy would be home from work collecting disability. Amazing. The night before, GCW will be holding an induction ceremony for the inaugural class of GCW's Indie Wrestling Hall of Fame, also in Midtown at the Cutting Room in Murray Hill. I spent many a late night in that neighborhood, usually singing 80 songs at Joshua Tree into the wee hours. I was devastated when I read that the owners closed it down a year ago. I have not been in the city much, so I only found out about it a few months ago. Jerry Lynn will be inducted to the Indie Wrestling Hall of Fame by Sean Waltman. Homicide will be inducted by Chris Dickinson. Ruckus will be inducted by Sanjay Dutt. And Dave Prazak will be inducted by who they haven't announced yet, but Prazak currently does play-by-play. He previously founded the women's promotion Shimmer in 2005, along with Allison Danger. I think for his influence with Shimmer alone, he deserves to be inducted. So many popular names passed through there and were given a platform early in their careers. Daphne wrestled there. Asuka, back in her Kana days. Paige, Bailey, Britt Baker, Ember Moon, Candice LeRae, Shotzi Blackheart, Deonna Purrazzo, Ruby Soho, back in her Heidi Lovelace days. The list goes on. I can't even name them all. So strictly for his impact and his influence there, I think Prazak is a most worthy inductee.